Another day, another chance, another win, another dance. Today, I'll be discussing to you all about something that's it's pretty much like a build up of what we were working on last time. So, what we're pretty much doing is we're adding an API to our application. So, in this lesson, we're gonna take a first look at reorganizing our routing structure and respond with data. First, you create new folders to house the routes you've built in main.js. The new structure follows some of the application programming interface conventions set up in earlier lessons. So we're going to modify some controllers, right, to respond with embedded JavaScript and JSON, uh, depending on the query parameters. We also test our new APIs connections by creating AJAX GET requests from your client-side JavaScript. This lesson covers organizing your routes, namespace, and creating API endpoints to respond JSON, then making AJAX requests from your views. So that's what you do. So organizing your routes. As the application grows, the routes in your main.js file start to overwhelm other middleware configurations. So routes are important parts of our application and keep our routes organized in a way that multiple developers can manage and understand, right? Which obviously is arguably important. So instead of this lesson, you break down the routing structure, we set up in an easy to follow directory structure, and so on and so forth. So going to be user routes, course routes, right? So start by creating a new folder called routes. So it's pretty much like the routes that you're going to be using. So moving user routes to user route.js. So here we got user routes. So you got the index for user controller. So update, create, login, logout, edit, update, delete, so on and so forth, and new. So that's pretty much what we have here, right? So and then you got a console router route. So these are pretty much the routes that are going to give us a CRUD operation, the CRUD functionality for our logins. Login authentication, move them into user routes.js as shown in the next listing. So we've got our user routes, right? So this is pretty much for our users. Whew, wow. Okay. So as you can see here, some cool routes that we created, right? Already did that. So we got API routes. So we got user routes, right? Then you got use strict, right? Variable router equals require express dot router. Constant users controller equals require, controllers users controller. Then you have our routes. So what these routes does is they pretty much make use of user controllers, right? User controllers. So the controllers that we have here, users controller, it imports that. So we're gonna be requiring user control, then our express module called router. So you're gonna require that as well. And then you got our routes. So these are pretty much the paths that you're gonna be using for our local, you know, on our front end. So that's what we're gonna be using for our front end. So our front end is gonna be making use of this. A user controller that index, user controller that validate, user controller that create, user controller, so on and so forth. Then user controller login, user controller authenticate, user controller logout, user controller that redirect, user controller that edit, user controller that update, user controller redirect view, so on and so forth. So this is pretty much our CRUD values, then module that exports equals router. and then pretty much got our subscriber routes. So what that does is, so we got use strict. So what use strict does is it pretty much uh, eradicates any improper syntax from being able to function on our terminal. So here we got our terminal, same terminals social media sites use, but on a global scale, using like supercomputers to jet set everything that we have on our front end. So we got our use strict, right? So what that does is it takes all our syntax and it cleans it up so that you'll be able to work properly whilst using valid syntax and eradicating invalid syntax. Same way, in which workers, would take, rotten crop and pretty much separate it from good crop. So you got a variables, pretty much same as like user routes, variables importing express or requiring express. So what express does is it takes our EJS, the app responsible module responsible for EJS, and it imports it, requires it. So require controller subscribers controller, and then yeah, that's what happens. Just the subscribers controller, the one you have in our controllers, and requires it whilst adding routes to it, whilst adding CRUD routes to it. Then index for our home page. What this does is tell local router object to use this route with specific name faces. So this is pretty much for our index. Yeah, what are you gonna say? So you got our routes, right? You're gonna be required API routes, home routes, error routes, course routes, subscriber routes, user routes, express routes. So obviously our index, that's pretty much our starting page. Our index is our starting page, right? So what our index does is it pretty much takes all our routes and it pretty much starts us off with that. So our index routes, right? That's pretty much a starting page, right? That's where our local host at 3000 starts off, right? So it pretty much takes our local router object and then it requires them, on our starting page. And then you got a home routes, home routes, routes that get home controller index slash contact home controller get subscription page. The model that exports router, then you strict. So it's pretty much the same thing here, here, and here. So it's pretty much taking out CRUD applications and importing and making use of them for. Wait, point. Yeah. Right, so as I was saying, it's just CRUD functionality that we're going to be adding. So much CRUD functionality that we're going to be adding here. So that's what's going to be happening. And then, yeah, it's just our reroutes. You know what I mean? So, yeah. So importing all routes into index.js, right? So it's how all these same routes you use to routes to the same router used by your application. Add the code next listing to index.js. Express.js router object operates through middleware. Within it, you can define specific tasks that you want to perform an incoming request. In this case, you're using a router to load routes and different namespaces. As with other middleware, if you want the routes in middleware to be part of the main application's middleware flow, you need to add it with app.use. So yes, I'm sorry, I just need to my app navigate it now. Right, so as with other middleware, if you want the router middleware to be a part of main application middleware flow, you need to add it with app.use and main.js. Move all the controllers required statements as well as the required statement for express.router. Right, so app.use router. So this is pretty much for localhost 3000. So that's what it's for. So that's what it's for. You know what I mean? And then yeah. So as you can see here, yeah. So app we have to use. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's and then obviously I switch on my local host, right? Switch it on, right? And then now I'm gonna go over to my main.js. You know what I mean? So that you know what I mean? Then connect dot use, right? And so on and so forth. And then as you're doing that, what I'll do is add password field. So what I'll do is one now. So I'm just trying to get like my password ready. That's what I'm trying to get. now. Then Node.js warnings.fix. Okay. Right, so I'm gonna get programming. Alright, so this is the display of JSON course results in the browser. Press months, then your Wexler and so on and so forth. Then you got latest courses, right? So you got use strict, then you got our express, right? Use strict and our express values. Right, then you got our variable routes. You got our const mongoose, const express session, and const cookie parser. Then const express validator, passport, home controller, and user. Right, then mongoose.connect, so that's your server. Mongoose.set, use create index, variable mongoose.connection, right? And app.set, app.use, what else? App.use, right? We pretty much got everything that we need. And then we also got our, so what you're going over is our middleware app.get use functions for express.json, app.use, right? And everything we're going to be making use of, and then our parameters, then our server, then yeah, so it's pretty much what we have. And then our navigator is a person by the name of Dabo, right? Without Masao Opa, right, is our navigator. So that's pretty much the person that we can be making use of, yeah. So that's our guy. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's the man that we is gonna be helping me. You know what I mean? So add password that field, right? That's a person. And yeah. And then npm init, right? You're gonna set out dependencies, developing dependencies, right? Author, scripts, description, main.js, so on and so forth. Then they're gonna be safe here. npm install all our node modules that we're gonna be making use of. Then they can be saved here. Then yeah, so you can press latest courses, right? So as you can see, you got culinary, brine, and cake design. Then you got the users. You got our cooking courses. So as you can see, you got a CRUD in our logins. So as you can see, I successfully logged in, and here's my flash. Then our latest courses, joined. So I already joined them, and then I got cooking courses as well. Alright, so we got to edit. Right, then you save. Right, so we pretty much got our CRUD functionality here. So that's where we got our CRUD functionality. So Brian, kick design, culinary. So I obviously I created these using create new course. I might edit, then my delete function. Our users, same thing. Then I deleted that. Then yeah, it's pretty much what you got. Then here's our network. So we don't need to throttle anything because it's not that we have an inadequate amount of like data. So we're not gonna run low on data, so it's not throttled. You can bootstrap.css recipe underscore app.css, jQuery.min.js, bootstrap.min.js, recipe app.js, and CSS, and so on and so forth. Then cooking courses, then yeah, in home. And then contacts. So this is pretty much like what we meant to go over is our API applications, you know, and our CRUD functionality as well. So that's what we need to go over. So yeah, it's pretty much what we need to go over. Anything that we need to go over, navigate. Anything that we need to say, navigator. Oh, there's nothing that we need to say. Okay, no problem. So thank you very much, everybody. Take care, God bless, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.